And welcome to Strait Talk. I'm Rachel Rubel. Obtaining Turkish citizenship by investing has just become a lot more attractive. The lira's slide over the past several months may have a silver lining, boosting foreign investment. The government recently lowered the requirements for offshore buyers. It's opened the doors for high-earning businessmen to not only open up shop here, but also streamlined the path to becoming a Turkish citizen. Adel Halim crunches the numbers with this report.
As the picturesque Bosphorus Strait flows through the heart of Istanbul, the dream of owning a property along the body of water separating Europe and Asia may soon become a reality for many foreign buyers, thanks to the weakened lira.
Having a seaside mansion on the Bosphorus is prestigious for business people, and Middle Eastern people would like one because we share similar culture, similar food, and they feel like they're home when they're here.
Now, Turkey is looking to lure even more investors with the promise of citizenship. To do so, the country has slashed the requirements first introduced in January 2017. There are a half dozen ways to get Turkish citizenship, from depositing at least $500,000 in a Turkish bank, down from $3 million, to creating at least 50 jobs, down from 100. But by far, the option that has generated the most interest is investing a minimum of $250,000 in the Turkish real estate market, reduced from $1 million. Estate agents say they've seen the effect the currency crisis has had on the housing market firsthand.
Many businessmen affected by the economic crisis may be selling their mansions out of necessity, and those who have the money may be using this opportunity to buy below market value.
Turkey's real estate sector, which had seen a softening in demand, welcomes the lowered investment thresholds. Turkey's investment office helps foreign investors enter the domestic marketplace. Fatih Altunyuva says the new rules are a win-win situation.
By win-win, I mean those are actually good business decisions, actually. Real estate business is a very important business in Turkey. It's a main part of our economy, and mainly it brings also high revenues. And that way they get a good business and they also get the Turkish citizenship.
Since the original investment for citizenship rules were introduced, Altunyuva says there have been 90 applicants, 40 of which have been processed and granted citizenship. So far, the majority of applications have come from Gulf countries.
We expect now a higher interest because now we have a different option besides citizenship to the countries or to the people who are not willing to get citizenship. We gave also the opportunity for a long-term resident permit, which was also a question actually from some countries in the region.
As there are political tensions in the region, accepting Turkish citizenship may not be in the best interest of a foreign investor. For example, Turkey's ally, Qatar, is not in the top 10 of foreign investors, but Saudi Arabia is.
On the economic side, we see that between the nations and between the people, it's a bit different. As you know, politics is something else, economy is something else, and the human relations are also something else.
Whether a multi-million-dollar home along the Bosphorus or a more modest flat elsewhere in the country, the message is clear. Turkey is open to investors, passport included. Adel Halim, Strait Talk, Istanbul.
Joining me now is Taha Arvis, a journalist at Daily Sabah, and Hamed Ilhamian, who is the Director of International Sales at Anka Invest. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you.
Taha, let me start with you.
Okay.
So why is Turkey loosening the rules on foreign investment? So what's the goal here?
I think there are two goals. I mean, the primary goal, I think, would be to attract investment, obviously. Many other countries have similar programs going on. So Turkey is doing two things. I think not only does it want to attract investment, but it also wants to attract investors, because not only is there a lack of investment currently in Turkey, but there's also a lack of human resources in many fields. So I think they want to make it easier for people to come to Turkey and live here, as Turkish citizens, and integrate with the society and contribute to the economy.
And Hamid, what countries are foreigners coming from to buy property here in Turkey?
Mostly in Turkey, the foreigners who are coming to invest in Turkey, they're from the Gulf countries, especially from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, from Dubai. You know, we see many people from the, the south of the Gulf, like Iran, from Iraq. These are the mostly people who are already investing in Turkey, especially in Istanbul.
What are the reasons that foreigners would want to invest in property in Turkey right now?
The first thing at the moment is the capital appreciation. You know, with the exchange rate of dollar, okay, it gives the people a better purchasing power, okay. So the amount of the people who are already putting money in Turkey now is approximately around $150,000 to $200,000, and this was before very difficult for them to bring this amount of money. But now with the exchange rate, it's very easier for them to buy bigger properties, okay, in better locations, okay, before they have to go to some certain areas in the west of Istanbul where the property is cheap. But now they can come more towards the downtown. You know, they can buy bigger properties, more central locations. They can even purchase commercial properties, which it brings higher rental income.
Taha, are there any mechanisms in place to control people who might come here for nefarious purposes, you know, criminals or perhaps money laundering? Because now that they've loosened the requirements, it certainly opens the opportunity up for a lot more people.
Sure. I mean, that's always a concern with these type of programs, but there are a lot of countries in the world that have similar problems. And London is a center for not only foreign investment, but also for money laundering, frankly. I mean, we've heard all the scandals that HSBC has been involved in other banks, frankly, many other banks. So these are problems that Turkey will face as more investors come to the country. But I think the government they have very strict abilities to track such things. I mean, there was a recent case where people were laundering hundreds of millions of dollars in very small increments. So I think the technology is so advanced now that it's not as difficult to track those things.
How much is Turkey expecting to see interest from foreign buyers increase with this new program?
You know, I think this program has come at a time maybe a little later than it should have come, only because there's currently an emerging market slowdown, a slump. So there is not as much money, frankly, as there was before in the world. I mean, 10 years ago, you had very few options as far as where you could park your money. You know, you would get less than 0.5% interest on your U.S. Treasury bonds. And so people were looking for investments in emerging markets for return on equity. Whatever that may be, it was practically zero a decade ago. So now people are investing. So Turkey now has competition. But I think the one thing that many people who live in Istanbul will tell you is that Turkey is, unlike many other places, a livable country, very much a livable country. I mean, whatever happens to the economy, you know, it's a beautiful country. I mean, the name of this program, Strait Talk, refers to these beautiful straits that Istanbul has. Unlike other countries, I mean, if you live in the Gulf, for example, I mean, Abu Dhabi is great, you know, Dubai is great, Qatar is great, but when the summer comes, the locals are gone, you know? I mean, it's just unlivable practically in the summer. And that doesn't really exist in Istanbul for any period of time. The winters aren't that bad. You know, the summers aren't that, in general, for all of Turkey. So in that respect, I think Turkey is expecting to get a lot of traction here, a lot of interest, but not as much as it could have probably in the years past.
Hamid, what about driving up the market price for locals? We've seen in other cities around the world where foreign investment comes in and they pay over market value for properties, and then locals can't afford to buy homes. And especially with the drop in the lira recently here in Turkey, is there concern about that at all?
It is. You know, to be honest, with the lira going down, okay, it makes it good for the foreign investors to come and purchase properties. But in the same time, you know, it's the prices are increasing. The prices are increasing, but there is a different way of looking at this, okay? Because when the people are coming, the market value goes higher. The real estate are getting more expensive, but at the same time, the quality of the investments, you know, is getting better, okay? many foreigners, they come here with the small amount of money, $150,000, okay, but this, they can buy a good property. But a Turkish person will never pay this amount of money because they are getting loans from the bank, okay. These loans, they can pay it with less than 0.98%, which was announced by the government, so it's less than 1%, and they can pay it up in 10 years. But a foreigner, when it comes here, he's bringing cash. So this will speed up the markets. Okay, so I see it as a good thing.
What sort of reassurances will investors have that their investments here in Turkey will be protected? I mean, as we know, rules change all the time, but foreigners who come in who may not be familiar with a lot of the rules of Turkey, I mean, are there certain reassurances in place for them?
The first thing was, you know, when Turkey announced to give the title deeds, full ownership to the foreigners in 2012, okay, the first insurance they give to the foreigners is that you're gonna own this property 100%, and it is inheritable. So that's the most, that's the best insurance you can get from one country.
Taha, are there any politics in place here, politics of the region? Is that reflected at all in foreign investment in Turkey?
I mean, I think politics plays an important role in real estate, especially in Turkey in these days, because many of the countries that that we're talking about that were investing in Turkey have turmoil of their own. They have a lot of questions unanswered about their regional politics. So Turkey has been relatively very stable in the last 15, 20 years. And unlike the other, I mean, we talk about some of the countries we're talking about, Saudi Arabia, you know, they have a very elderly monarch who may pass away at any point, and then who will inherit the throne. That exists for all the Gulf countries, frankly. The neighbors to the south, Syria, Iran, Iraq, these are not exactly the most stable countries. So many of these people who live in these areas are investing in Turkey because Turkey has stability. You know, I mean, despite economic crises that may occur that globally nowadays, politically it's a stable country. It's a very old, society. Let's put it that way. I mean, we live right now. We're 3 miles away from the third oldest golf course in the entire world because, you know, a Scottish guy came here 100 years ago, and, you know, so it's not a new country. Many of these Gulf countries have just recently become independent from their colonial powers. So I think these investors are coming here because they're in it for the long term. Turkey doesn't have a lot of political instability anymore.
All right, Hamid Elhamian and Taha Arvis, thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.